So the Prime Minister says we must have digital ID. That's the way we'll stop illegal immigration. Well, think about it. Germany has ID cards, strict ID and checks. It's made no difference at all in Germany, and nor will it here. All that digital ID will be is a means of controlling the population, of telling us what we can and can't do, of fining the innocent. And didn't we see it all when we had the pandemic, when you had to have vaccine ID to travel, to do various things? Did that stop the COVID pandemic spreading? Did it hell? All it did was put cost and inconvenience on everybody else. I also worry about massive data banks being held by the government, being hacked by foreign governments, by private companies, by criminals. I do not see a single benefit to the government having digital ID other than them controlling what we do, what we spend, and where we go. And we, in Reform, are wholly opposed to it in every single way.
So there you are, there's Nigel. And actually, because I'm a great critic of Nigel Farage, but not leaning towards him just yet. He's got to do more than that. We're going to play a couple more clips, Cam, if you could get these ready for me, 2030 and Oliver. I want to play you this one. This is the digital world in 2030. Cam, if you could play 2030, please.
Bruce Kowalski. Your monthly universal basic income has been deposited into your account. For more information, press details. You have been paid 2,000 central bank digital tokens. The following fees are being deducted: accommodation fee, food ration fee, recycling fee, clean energy fee, personal greenhouse gas emissions fee, climate change fee, diversity fee. Your current remaining balance is 5 central bank digital tokens, and if not spent, it will expire in 7 days.
The Western world has just gone nuts. Look at the UK, look at parts of the US. It's just, I feel very sad for the UK. Dr. Marcus Papadopoulos, what the hell's happened to your country?
Well, first of all, Mike, I am very happy that you made it clear that the world has not gone insane. Rather, the Western world has gone insane. I would also add to that the Western world is ruled by very, very dark entities, by which I do not mean the likes of Starmer. Starmer is a puppet. Starmer is a useful idiot. Yes, he is absolutely repulsive in every sense of the word. But as I said, he is a puppet. In order to understand what is happening in Britain and the rest of the Western world, including, of course, Australia, one must first of all understand the actual structure of power in the Western world. Then, when one has determined the actual structure of power in the Western world, one must then understand the nature of the dark, malignant forces which rule the Western world.
Yeah, I agree. If you look at Anthony Albanese, the Prime Minister of Australia's speech at the UN yesterday, he got a photo op with Donald Trump. That was it. But the he has his brand new toy called the E-Safety Act, or whatever it's called, which means that basically you need a biometric scan and stuff like that to log on to socials, just to prove that you're either over 16, or if you're under 16 you can't do it, because YouTube, for example, is a terrible, terrible, evil thing. Surely they'd let people watch YouTube because it's probably a great government vehicle for pushing propaganda. But I noted what Ursula von der Leyen said. She said, I'm just going to put her accent on. She said, "We will be watching and noting." And she was very excited, Marcus, that there is a way out there, maybe, that they can surveil, control, and dictate what people say just like that. How scary is this for not just the Western world, but the entire world?
Well, my response to von der Leyen and her ilk is this. Yes, you are watching and surveying us, but we are also watching and surveying you. We amount to hundreds of millions of people. You and your kind amount to a tiny, tiny fraction. Not even 1% do the Western ruling elites and their useful idiots amount to. Yes, Mike, the situation in Britain and the rest of the Western world is extremely grave. And of course, recently, the puppet Starmer announced that he would ensure that digital ID is made mandatory in the United Kingdom. And then, of course, the useful idiot Albanese in Australia made the same statement. Well, if the likes of Starmer are truly committed to protecting the British people, then why doesn't he take action to end illegal immigration? Countering illegal immigration is the responsibility of the military and the police. Thus, there is no need for digital ID. But of course, we all know that the likes of the British ruling elite require a pretext. They require a lie in order to introduce and justify digital ID. And digital ID is a crucial element in the agenda of the British ruling elite to enslave the British population. Digital ID is about surveillance, it is about control, and it is about destroying what remains of civil liberties and freedoms in Britain. So, whilst the situation is extremely grave, I am very encouraged by the reality that almost on a weekly basis, more and more British people are waking up and are saying no and are defying. If we compare the situation today in Britain to the situation at the beginning of the year, yes, on the one hand, the situation is even worse today. But then that is inevitable. That is why the British ruling elite chose Starmer. Starmer has no soul. His eyes are dead. There is nothing that he will not do to satisfy his masters. So we knew that the responsibility of Starmer is to introduce the most heinous aspects of the British ruling elite's agenda. All that said, on the other hand, so many British people are alive to the malignant cancer that is the British ruling elite. And I would also say the same about Australians. So many Australians are awake now, and this is to be commended. And we must keep on encouraging people to learn about the reality of Britain and of Australia and to say no and to defy.
Can I ask you also, but we are going to talk about Russia and Ukraine in a tick. We see that TikTok is basically being sold now, and the reason why they moved it away from the Chinese, according to the State Department and Donald Trump, is because China was siphoning all this information and the information on all the users, unless China was going to work out some strange robot to go and kill each person. It was just more for commercial advantage and having that data, because it's not going to do them much good unless they're going to do something to and attack someone, which they're not. So what they've done is to stop that threat from China, they've given it to the guy who's in charge of the whole lot. His company, Oracle, is Larry Ellison. Now, Larry Ellison is the biggest donor to the IDF. Now, assuming that he has strong ties to Israel, instead of using that information for a commercial advantage, it can also be used for other more nefarious activities. And if they wanted to find out and have a dossier on each particular person or people of interest, TikTok would be a great way of achieving that particular goal, wouldn't it?
It's abundantly clear that Israel, which has exposed itself to the rest of the world as being one of the most criminal, one of the most violent, and one of the most murderous of all countries in the world, is now attempting to silence any form of debate which exposes the horrific nature of the Israeli state. That is why TikTok has now been taken over. TikTok, whilst I am not a particular fan of TikTok, and I have many criticisms of the Chinese government, though I do not believe that the Chinese government is attempting to take over the world. No, that is the objective of the Western ruling elites or the globalists. Nonetheless, TikTok has played a very important role, along with X, in exposing the Israeli genocide against the Palestinians and also the unbelievable and extraordinary influence and power that the Israel lobby has in America. So that is why TikTok has been taken over. Now we need to see what will follow. Will there be an attempt to take over X? That is a distinct possibility. But for many of us, I would say this: I encourage Israel to keep on behaving on the international scene, for example, in America, as it is continuing to do, because Israel is exposing itself more than anyone else in the world has ever done. The same can also be applied to the likes of woke. For many years, many of us, including myself, warned about the cancerous nature of these various organizations and movements which comprise woke. But those organizations and movements remained quite quiet. They weren't openly saying what they believed in private. Now they are openly saying it, and I am encouraged by how emboldened they are. I say, let them keep on saying exactly what they believe. Let them keep on feeding what will be their own destruction.
I agree. Donald Trump is sort of goading Putin, and his latest one was just a truly, someone should tell him to zip his lip, that he, I still can't believe I read it, that he believes that Ukraine can take back its lost territory. And as he was saying that, I did notice a few pigs fly by, because why would Trump be making such outlandish statements? Is it just to get up the nostrils of Putin, which won't work? All it does is make Donald Trump look like a bullfed on the world stage.
Well, first of all, I wouldn't attach too much importance to what Trump says in public, for example, on social media. After all, Trump has said that he is, quote, great friends with the Chinese president. That is hardly the case. He has also said that he is, quote, great friends with Starmer. Well, that is even more so not the case, given how much Trump bitterly dislikes Starmer. Let us not forget that each and every time that Trump has met with Starmer, he has humiliated Starmer. Indeed, on one occasion, Trump in the White House mocked Starmer's voice. And the reason being that Starmer has an incredibly ugly voice. Now, with that said, there is no tangible evidence that Trump or the Trump administration has changed its stance on Ukraine. Western mainstream media, when it comes to Ukraine, is tasked by the Western ruling elites to keep the official narrative going, namely that Russia doesn't just threaten Ukraine, it threatens the whole of Europe, it threatens the whole of the Western world, it threatens Western democracy, and it threatens Western civilization. So it is only inevitable that the goons who work for Western mainstream media will jump at any opportunity to say that Trump has now turned on the Kremlin. Well, how many times has Western mainstream media claimed that Trump has turned on Russia? They've claimed it as many times as they have said that the so-called coalition of the willing is ready to go into Ukraine and is ready to maintain peace. The reality is that Trump does not consider Ukraine to be of importance to America. He certainly doesn't regard it as being of importance to American national security. He has said before that the war is the responsibility of the Biden administration. And of course, he has cut down political, economic, and military support for Ukraine. Yes, he has said he will supply American weapons to the Europeans, and then the Europeans can do what they want with them. Trump, after all, is a businessman. Trump will exploit the warmongering nature of the British and European ruling elites for financial gain. But other than that, there is no tangible evidence that Trump is going to resurrect the policy of the Biden administration in relation to Ukraine. Indeed, we have heard that the Trump administration has told the Baltic states and Poland that America will be redeploying American military resources from Eastern Europe to other parts of the world. Now, that could mean in the South China Sea. That's speculation on my behalf, but it is factual that the Trump administration has told the Baltic states and Poland that. Note how British mainstream media, for example, has made no mention of that.
Clearly the message from mainstream media has been that Russia is a threat to Europe. Russia is less of a threat to Europe than the EU is to Europe. And I think people like von der Leyen and these people, although von der Leyen is just a figurehead at the moment, how does Europe reduce the threat of not Russia, because there really is no threat from Russia, how do they reduce the threat to themselves by dealing with the EU and all those pathetic, I mean, if you look at how pathetic people are, Macron, on his way to the UN, he couldn't get through the traffic, so he calls Donald Trump, and Trump says, walk. So, I mean, they haven't got a whole lot of respect, but how do the people within Europe deal with the EU itself, get rid of the government? How do they do that?
As we talk, Mike, there are increasing numbers of patriotic and nationalist organizations and movements springing up all across continental Europe. And that is because there is a cultural and spiritual revival in continental Europe. Vast numbers of Europeans are resurrecting their culture, are resurrecting their religion, Christianity. Vast numbers of Europeans now understand that the threat to continental Europe is not an external one, it is an internal one. The threat comes from the European Union and also from NATO. Europeans are acutely aware that the European Union has removed borders, that the European Union has flooded continental Europe with immigrants, which has resulted not just in catastrophic crime levels, but also but has also had a disastrous impact on the cultural and spiritual values of Europeans. And also, the ordinary European man and woman does not look at Russia as an enemy. It doesn't necessarily mean that the ordinary man and woman is pro-Kremlin. No, not at all. But the Europeans know that the Kremlin has not threatened Europe. The Kremlin has not arrested people in France or Germany for expressing an opinion. The Kremlin has not flooded Europe with immigrants. So, what we see in Europe is extremely encouraging. And there is a difference between the protests in continental Europe and the protests in Britain. In continental Europe, people are protesting on weekdays, for example, on Mondays and Wednesdays. Why is that important? Because that is a way of having a major impact on the economies of the European Union. Because the European ruling elites understand one thing: money. So if you protest, if you don't go to work on a weekday and instead go on protests, that will have a major impact on the European economies. In Britain at the moment, we do not see that. So British people now need to think long and hard. If they want to secure the future of their children and their grandchildren and so on, they are going to have to take drastic measures. They're going to have to take a leaf out of the book of people in continental Europe.
As we wrap this up, I was just thinking the advances that Russia have made within Ukraine, and that the longevity of this stoush, and the questions are, when will it finish? Will it finish? When I was there when Prigozhin was a little bit upset at Putin, or so the media said. I don't believe that, but he was heading towards Moscow, and I looked over at the Kremlin. There's a hole on the roof, but the locals there said that they were not worried, and they just said it will work itself out. It will work itself out. Don't worry about it. Have another drink. Could we apply that principle or that feeling to what's happening at the moment between Russia and Ukraine? They'll work themselves out. Just let it roll out, and it will finish when it finishes.
Well, first of all, neither Putin nor any other Kremlin official said that the Russian military campaign in Ukraine would take, quote, 3 days. Mm-hmm. It was Mark Milley, the American commander, the American general, who said that it would take the Russian army, quote, 3 days to take Kiev. In addition to that, at the start of the Russian military campaign in Ukraine, Putin said, and I quote, "The special military operation will take as long as is required to achieve its objectives." Now, turning to the situation on the battlefield in Ukraine, yes, as you rightly said, Mike, the Russian army is advancing along the entire front line. The Russian army is now capturing territories in the oblast, in the region of Dnipropetrovsk. That is something that, again, British mainstream media is barely talking about. Mm. The war in Ukraine, regrettably, will not be ended peacefully. I have said from day one of the Russian military campaign in Ukraine that it will be decided on the battlefield, that the Russian army will emerge victorious, however long it takes. The Russian government, the Russian population as a whole, are wholly committed to capturing Ukraine, to bringing it back into Russia. Such is the importance of the lands which comprise Ukraine to ordinary Russians, and such is the importance of ensuring that Ukraine is never admitted to NATO. So the Russian military and the Russian people are prepared for the war to go on for another 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. Indeed, the average Russian would be prepared for the Russian army to incur, let's say, 1 million losses in Ukraine, if that means victory. Again, people do not understand the mindset of the average Russian. The average Russian will say, whatever it takes to defend the motherland, whatever it takes to defend Mother Russia. So the Russian army will capture either all or most of Ukraine, and that is how the conflict will be brought to an end.
Yeah, totally agree. I wish it was sooner than later, though. Dr. Marcus Papadopoulos, if somebody wants to find out more about you, how do they do that?
Thank you, as always, Mike, for the opportunity to express my opinions and to offer analysis. I can be found on X, I can be found on Facebook, I can be found on YouTube, I can be found on Rumble, and I can be found on Odyssey. Also, my 2 books pertaining to Russian history and contemporary Russian politics can be found on Amazon.
Yeah, I have to say thank you. Your insight and your candor and all sorts of other things, second to none, and always appreciated. Dr. Marcus Papadopoulos, historian, analyst, and author here at The World Today.